Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Read It Before You Eat It live webinar for parents and carers. It's presented to you by the New South Wales Health South Eastern Sydney Local Health District Health Promotion Service. My name is Jacqueline and I'm the Childhood Obesity Prevention Officer, and I'm also an accredited practicing dietitian, and I'll be your presenter for today. So before we get started, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land we are meeting on today, and I'd like to pay our respect to elders past and present, and extend that respect to any Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal people present today. All right, so let's get started. So what will this session cover? So while fresh foods such as fresh fruit and vegetables, fresh meat and fish, they're usually the healthiest option, we understand that it's not always possible, and especially for busy families, and packaged foods might be more convenient. So this webinar will go through some simple label reading steps to help you choose healthier packaged foods. So we'll cover tips for reading food labels and the ingredients list. We'll go through how to use the health star rating, and we'll also have an interactive activity to identify some healthy packaged food swaps. We'll also answer some frequently asked questions at the end of the webinar. So thank you everyone for submitting your questions when you registered. All right, so with so many products available in the supermarket, it can be confusing to know which is the healthiest option for your family. Health claims and endorsements on the front of packaged foods can make some packaged foods seem more nutrition than what they actually are. So for example, reduced fat or reduced salt claims, they claim that they have less salt or fat than your standard variety. However, it still might be above what we consider healthy. Or for example, no added sugar. So these foods might still be high in energy or fat, or they still might be high in sugar from natural sugars. And then we also have light. So when manufacturers use the word light, sometimes they're using it to refer to the texture, the color, or the taste of food. So before we get started, I'd like to know a bit more about you. I have a question which you can answer in the chat box. So the question is, what do you look for when you read a food label? Or what items on a packaged food influences your decision to buy the food? I encourage you to share your answer with all attendees if you want. And we'll have a look at the chat. So I see some chat coming through. All right, we've got a few answers there. So it's a little bit varied. We've got health star rating, sugar content, calories. Yeah, so low sugar, low salt, sodium. It is quite varied at the moment, yeah. So I guess making sense of these food labels, and especially the health claims, can help us make the right choice when selecting packaged foods. I might move on to the next slide now. So now that we know why we need to read food labels, let's go through a few steps on how to read food labels. So before I get started, the food label or nutrition information panel, as you can see here, that's usually found on the back or the side of packaged foods. And it lists the main ingredients. So we've got energy, protein, fat, carbohydrates, and sodium or salt. So what are we looking for when we're reading nutrition, when we're reading the nutrition information panel? We always want to check the per 100 gram column to compare nutrients in similar food products. The per serve column lets you calculate how much of a nutrients or how many kilojoules or how much energy you'll actually eat. However, this serve size is usually different to your portion size, so the amount of food you serve yourself. And the serving size is determined by the food manufacturer, and there aren't any guidelines or recommendations as to how big or small they can determine the serve size. So it varies from product to product, and it makes it a bit difficult to use that per serve column to compare foods. So one of our questions from registration was whether sugar or fat content was more important when reading food labels. So fat and sugar are both important parts of the 5 label reading steps. We also want to have a look at fibre, sodium or salt, and the ingredients list. So over the next few slides, I'll go into a bit more detail about these 5 label reading steps. All right, so step 1 is to check fat. So fat information on a label usually looks like this on the right, and it's highlighted in blue. So it shows the total fat and then also a breakdown of the different types of fat. It's important to remember that not all fats are bad. So we have our healthy fats, which you'll usually find listed as monounsaturated or polyunsaturated fats. And then we also have our unhealthy fats. So these are our saturated and trans fats. So when looking at fat, we want to have a look at the total fat and the saturated fat breakdown. And we're aiming for less than 10 grams per 100 grams of total fat and less than 3 grams per 100 grams of saturated fat. So in this example, we can see highlighted in blue that the total fat is 1.2 grams. So that's well below our 10 grams. And then we've also got saturated fat here, which is 0.3 grams per 100 grams. And again, that's less than our 3 gram criteria. So if we're just looking at fat, this example might be a healthy choice. So step 2 is to look at the sugar content. So avoiding sugar completely is not necessary, but we want to try avoid larger amounts of added sugars. So sugar is found naturally in fruit and dairy products such as milk. However, added sugars are those that have been processed, such as table sugar, and added to foods to enhance the flavour, and it's also associated with excess weight gain. So one of the questions we got asked from registration was if sugar is a carbohydrate. So sugar is a simple carbohydrate, so this means it's broken down really quickly by the body. And so when looking for sugars on the nutrition information panel, we want to look under the carbohydrate section, and we want to aim for the least amount of sugar or less than 15 grams per 100 grams. So if the product has more than 15 grams per 100 grams, it's likely to be an unhealthy choice. But there are a few exceptions to the rule, and we want to check the ingredients list for added sugars. And I'll go through the ingredients list a little bit later. So in this example, we see sugars we've got 11.8 grams per 100 grams. So that's below our 15 gram limit and meets our criteria. So step 3 is to check the fibre. So fibre is great for keeping us fuller for longer. It's good for the digestive system, and with good hydration, it helps prevent constipation. So fibre is the exception for that per 100 gram rule. So we want to look at fibre per serve, and we're aiming for 3 grams or more per serve. So fibre is not always listed on food labels, as manufacturers aren't required to list it unless they're making a claim about fibre. So a tip is to look for words like whole grain or wholemeal on the front of the package or the ingredients list. In this example, we can see that fibre is highlighted in green. We're looking at the per serve column, and we've got 6.4 grams per serve. So this meets our 3 gram per serve criteria. And if we're just looking at fibre, this might be a healthier choice. So step 4 is to check for sodium or salt. So salt is eaten in our diet it mostly comes from processed and packaged foods. So it's important to choose low salt products when we can to reduce the amount of salt we eat, which will help prevent high blood pressure, which can lead to heart disease and stroke. So a question from registration was, what amounts of sugar or salt is considered okay for pre-packaged snacks? So for any packaged food or snack, we want to aim for less than 400 milligrams of sodium per 100 grams. But if we can, we want to aim for less than 120 milligrams. So in this example, it's highlighted in purple. We can see that we have 215 milligrams of sodium or salt per 100 grams. This is acceptable as it's under that 400 milligram mark, but if it was under 120, that would be an even better choice. And the last step, step 5, is to check the ingredients list. So as I mentioned earlier, it's important to check the list for added sugar, fat, or salt. So with the ingredients list, it shows all the ingredients and manufacturers are required to list them all. And it's in order from the most to the least by weight. So usually we want to check the percentage of the first ingredient, if there's a percentage. And if it's quite low, we want to look at the first 3 ingredients. If sugar, fat, or salt is in the first 3 ingredients listed, we might want to swap it for a better choice or have a look at an alternative product. We also want to be aware of other products, for other names for fat, sugar, and salt. So I've listed them here on the slide, but you can also find these names on the label reading resource that we'll provide after the webinar. So in this example, we can see that the first ingredient is only 76% cereal, and the third ingredient is sugar. So we might want to have a look at other options, but I always recommend checking the nutrition information panel as well. All right, so that covers our 5 label reading steps. But I want to touch on the health star rating, as you've probably seen this on the front of some packaged foods. So the health star rating, it rates the overall nutrition profile of packaged foods, and it's important to note it's only for packaged foods. So fresh fruit and vegetables and meat, they're often sold unpackaged and won't have a health star rating. So the health star rating can be a simple way to compare packaged foods and drink from the same category. So what I mean by that is we would compare a breakfast cereal with a breakfast cereal, not a breakfast cereal with a muesli bar or flavored milk with a yogurt. So foods are rated from 0.5 star to 5 stars, and the more stars, the better the choice. And generally we want to aim for 3.5 stars and above. However, the health star rating's voluntary, so manufacturers aren't required to pop the health star rating on the front of their package, so it's always important to check the food label. The health star rating can also be used by manufacturers in a way that makes it a bit confusing. So for example, Milo assumes you make it with skim milk, which has added nutrients and benefits like calcium, and that will boost up the rating. Flavored yogurts, they're often high in added sugar, but they also contain benefits such as protein and calcium, which also boosts their rating. So one of our questions from registration was around breakfast cereals and how high sugar cereals have a high health star rating. So similar to the flavored yogurt example, some cereals are high in added sugar, but they also contain nutrients such as protein or fibre, which helps boost up the health star rating.